Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar discussing how to build flexible and inclusive workspaces. I'm Colette from ZOKRI, and we're absolutely thrilled to be the headline sponsor for the 2026 UK Company Culture Awards. You might be wondering what a business growth consultancy that specialises in strategic OKRs is doing sponsoring a Culture Awards programme. And that's exactly the conversation that we need to have, because it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding that holds so many businesses back. What we believe at ZOKRI, culture doesn't just support your strategy, culture is your strategy. If you think about it, you can have the most brilliant business plan in the world, the most innovative flexible workspace policy, the most inclusive hiring practices, but if your culture doesn't enable people to execute on those intentions, you're essentially building a beautiful car with no engine. We work with organisations across the UK, from ambitious scale-ups to enterprise leaders like Capgemini and Omron. And here's what we've learned over the past decade. 95% of ZOKRI OKR implementations last beyond 2 years, whereas the industry average, 68% fail within 2 years. Now, the difference isn't the framework, it's understanding that strategy execution lives or dies based on whether your culture enables it. When we talk about flexible workspaces today, whether that's hybrid working, remote teams, or reimagined office environments, we're not just talking about where people sit. We're talking about creating the conditions where your people can think strategically, act decisively, and feel genuinely connected to what matters most. The challenging part is you can't policy your way to a high-performance culture. You can't workshop your way there either. You need the connective tissue that turns strategic intent into daily reality. And that's where the right frameworks, the right conversations, and critically the right leadership development comes in. At ZOKRI, we describe our approach as transforming how teams think, plan, and execute. But what that really means is we help you build the systems that make your culture and your strategy inseparable from each other. When someone in your organisation, whether they're working from home, from the office, or a cafe in Barcelona, when they can clearly see how their work connects to your strategic goals, when they understand not just what they're doing but why it matters, when they have the psychological safety to challenge ideas and the clarity to take action, that's when flexible workspaces become flexible advantage. So as you listen to today's webinar and think about how you're building flexibility and inclusion into your workplace, I'd encourage you to ask yourself one question. Is your culture designed to execute your strategy, or are they running on parallel tracks hoping to meet up one day? That gap between strategic aspiration and cultural reality, that's the space where growth goes to die. But it's also where the greatest opportunities lay for organisations that are brave enough to bridge it. We're sponsoring the UK Company Culture Awards because we know that the future belongs to companies that understand this connection. Companies don't just win awards for great culture or strategic execution, but recognise that they are the same thing. Whatever you take away from this session, we hope it moves you to one step closer to making your culture and your strategy impossible to separate. Thank you.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to today's webinar from Company Culture 101, Flexing for Success. It's great to see everybody on the webinar today. My name is Mahmood Ghaznavi, and I'm going to be here today joined by two co-hosts, Zoë Blogg and Louise Boyer, and we're going to be talking to you about flexible working and how it can work for your organisation. So what we're going to do before we start, just give you a little bit of background about ourselves. So I'll make a start before handing across to Zoë, who will then hand on to Louise. As I said, my name's Mahmood. I've recently started as the first head of people at Nexus Planning Limited. So Nexus is a professional services firm which delivers town planning consultancy services to the public and private sectors. We're 12 years old as a business, coming on to 13, so we're going to be entering our difficult teenage years, or exciting teenage years, depending on how you want to describe it. and we're made up of a team of 50 people who work pretty much on a flexible and a hybrid basis from 5 offices across the UK. I've been working in HR for, good goodness me, 25 years now, and that's covered a huge range of sectors: financial services, professional services. But I think the key underpin has always been around organisational change, transformation, and building really work environments that allow us to get the most from our people. So I have 2 co-presenters today who've got far more interesting backgrounds than I have. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you across to Zoe at Reboot Online.
Hi everyone, and thanks, Mahmood. So I'm Zoe. I'm a managing director at Reboot Online. We're an organic search agency, so what that means is SEO and digital PR. Essentially, we get our clients found online. As MD, I set the vision and the direction for the team. We're also 50 people strong. We operate fully remotely across the UK on a 4-day working week, so that means no Fridays. Reboot's won multiple awards over the years, mostly for our culture and delivery. And very recently, we celebrated winning the Best Global SEO Agency of the Year, which really validates our approach. And over to Louise.
Hello everyone, thanks Zoe. So yes, I'm Louise. I'm People Director for a company called Interlink. The business was founded in 2018 by Jay and Andy. They're brilliant co-founders from the industry. Our industry is actually marketing services, but specifically lead gen. So we work with some of the top technology businesses or their agency partner across the world. We are around about 150 people now, 60 of which I personally support with my people team across UK, North America and APAC. And across those teams, we support hybrid working, remote working, flexible working. And over the last 3 years since I've been supporting the business, we've won awards for being a great place to work for women, because we're around about 70% female across those 3 locations. And we recently won the Culture Awards for 2025 for having the best flexible working policy. And driven by the founders, we introduced the 4-day work week in 2022 and have been championing that and navigating that over the last few years. I'm very passionate about HR. I've been in HR now for over 20 years and have worked for businesses all different shapes and sizes. But my sweet spot is definitely smaller scaling businesses, because I love the variety. I love working with passionate founders, and every day is different. So it makes it very exciting. But thank you for having me on the webinar today.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Thank you, Louise. I can certainly agree with you there, Louise, when you talk about working in the SME environment and passionate founders. It is a tremendously exciting environment to work in, and you really get to feel that you can shape what's happening to an organisation from a HR perspective. And that's what we want to really do today, is sort of give you our thoughts, give you our perspectives on flexible working, and what thoughts that you could have about how you move forward with flexible working in your organisation. There's lots that we've got to share with you today, but we don't want today just to be all about us talking to you, as it were, in a 2D world. So I know there's the opportunity to ask questions, so please do so as we go through today's webinar. In terms of how we're going to structure this morning's session, we're just going to do some context setting, some scene setting to start with. So I'll talk a little bit about flexible working, remote working, hybrid working, just to create some simple definitions so we all know what we're talking about. I want to talk a little bit about the legal framework. because in the UK, the legal framework is important, and there were some changes introduced a couple of years ago, which it's just good to make sure that everybody's refreshed on those. And I want to talk a little bit about who owns flexible working and hybrid working, because I think it's only a minor point, but I think it's a very important one in terms of how you consider adopting and introducing flexible working in your own respective organisations. Share some data with you as well. There's been, over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been lots of news about people working remotely, people working flexibly, and a lot of that has been negative, I would say. I certainly had that negative bias. So what I want to do is to share some data with you today, which hopefully redresses a little bit of that balance. And after I've done that, we're going to hand over to Zoe and Louise, who are going to share sort of some real world experiences, how they have worked with flexible working and remote working in their organisations. And, we want to make sure we give you a balanced perspective here. So there is a huge amount of positive that we want to talk with you about today and we want to share with you. But of course, whenever we're talking about organisational change and we're talking about change that relates to people, there are challenges that we need to face into, that we need to address. And certainly as we go through today's session, both Zoe and Louise and myself, we'll talk a little bit about those challenges and how we've addressed them. We'll talk a little bit about benefits and measuring. Measuring what we do from a people perspective is important. Looking at the benefits is there, but what we don't want to do is get sort of OTT on measurement and benefits. There's measure something that's worth measuring, don't measure for the sake of it, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. And we'll talk a little bit also about how we could use tech to help us as well. And as I said a few minutes ago, this is a session for you all today. So if you do have questions, please fire away with those, and we'll see what we can do to answer them as we get through towards the end of the webinar today. Right, so let's crack on. I just want to talk a little bit about my own interpretation of flexible working, remote working, hybrid working. There's no strict definition, but I think it's just useful just to sort of be able to understand how as a HR professional, I interpret each one. So for me, flexible working is about working a different pattern, be that be hours, days, times of year, to what we would all normally consider to be a standard full-time 35, 37 and a half, 40-hour week. So it's somebody who is actually not working that pattern, but working something different. As I said, be that the hours that they work, be that the days that they work, be that the times of the day that they work, or be that the segments of the year that they work in as well. So that's how I tend, from a sort of very simple perspective, look at flexible working. Remote working for me is, it can be a part of flexible working. It doesn't have to, but it can be a part of flexible working. That's where, someone isn't necessarily based or working full-time or whatever time they work from what we would consider or see as the traditional place of work: office, factory, retail centre, however, school, hospital, however we would describe that. And for me, that remote working can be you're doing it from home. It can be you're doing it from another location around where you are. So we've seen, the huge success of pop-up workspaces, shared workspaces. It could be that. And, let's not forget that something that we embrace at Nexus could actually mean working from a different country, working overseas for part of your time as well. In fact, I've got one of my colleagues who's jetting off to Karachi in a couple of days' time to spend 6 weeks with her family there, and she's going to be spending some of that time on holiday and some of that time working. So I was trying to get my head around a 5-hour time difference when I was scheduling in our catch-up meetings. But, let's not forget that remote working doesn't necessarily just have to be working from home. It can be other places as well. And then there's hybrid working as well, which is, where you're doing a combination really of working remotely and working at your traditional office space. And, we've certainly seen that hybrid model build up quite significantly since the sort of COVID pandemic that we all had to face into 5 or 6 years ago. So that's just a little bit about the definitions and so forth. Let me get on to the dry stuff, which is the legal element. It is important. I've tried to make it as undry as possible, just because us HR professionals. So sorry, Louise. Sometimes we can get a bit obsessed with the statutory or the legal side of things. So let me see if I can sort of keep it nice and straightforward for you. So I think the first thing to point out is that all employees have got a legal right to request to make a request for flexible working, and they have that right from the first day that they start work. And that's something that sometimes people overlook. There's in the HR world, there's lots of talk about qualifying service or qualifying periods, but for requesting, having the right to request flexible working, that starts from day one of somebody's employment with an organisation. And that request to work flexibly can cover sort of 3 or 4 key elements. It can cover the number of hours that somebody works. It can include when they start work or when they finish work, or it can both. It can include the days that they work and wanting to change the actual days that they work. And it can also include where that individual works as well. So there's a range of elements that can contribute and be included into a right to request flexible working. And from an employer perspective, I think the most important thing to take away from today is it's the responsibility of the employer to deal with that request in a reasonable manner. Now, what does a reasonable manner mean? So there's most really 2 or 3 points which will help guide employers from that point of view. So that involves assessing what the advantages, what the disadvantages are of that particular request. It could involve actually discussing alternative options, which could, alternative start or finish times, days that somebody suggested, and looking and investigating those. But it's important that alternative element is looked into. And in a situation where somebody's made a request and that is not approved, that's rejected, it's always important to remember to offer that individual the opportunity to question that and to appeal that as well. And, let's be very clear. It is absolutely reasonable and correct that in some circumstances, an employer may have to reject a request. What we've always got to remember is that request has got to be anchored in good business reasons. What are the operational reasons why something isn't being allowed or isn't being permitted, as it were. And that brings me on to the ownership point, really. There is a tendency, and I've seen this myself in organisations I've worked with, there's a tendency to see flexible working as a HR matter. Oh, somebody's requested to work flexibly, let's send it over to the HR team and then get them to deal with it. HR has a critically important role to play in flexible working, not just from an organisational culture and getting the best out of people point of view, but to make sure that requests are considered properly. But I cannot stress enough that how we work in the workplace is very much an operational and an organisational matter. And so I really see flexible working as being as much owned by the organisation and the operation of that organisation as it is by the HR team. And that's a really important point, which I don't want people to sort of lose sight of. Don't see flexible working as, it's a HR issue because it's got to do with people. People are organisations. People are what make organisations successful. So it's really important that we see flexible working and all the elements of that as an organisational and operational piece as well as a HR piece. Right, so just finally from me, before I hand over to Zoe and then to Louise, I just want to share some stats and some data with everyone to help frame what we're going to talk about. And these all come from a pretty recent survey undertaken by the CIPD. YouGov conducted the survey on behalf of the CIPD. It was done in 2025, so it has real relevance for what we're talking about today. And it was, there was just over 2,000 HR professionals participated in the survey, and sort of 5,000 people spread across different work organisations, workers, as it were. So here's some headlines for people to reflect on. So 91% of the employers who participated stated that they offered some form of flexible working. So, flexible working is very much an ingrained part, an embedded part of, how we all work now. 74% of organisations said that they had some form of hybrid working in place. Now, interestingly, that 74% had reduced from 84% when the survey was last done in 2023, but it's still, 3 out of 4 organisations that we're talking about here. It was interesting that, just perhaps on the flip side of that almost a third of employees stated that they actually remained hesitant about formally making a flexible working request. So just under 1 in 3 people were really worried about, do I really want to do this? Make a formal request. And that was similar. So it was pretty much similar statistic fact in terms of people who wanted to make an informal request to work flexibly. 2/3 of the employers had a framework where they required a minimum weekly or monthly attendance in the office, that hybrid working model. And interestingly, 41% of employees had said that they felt that hybrid working had actually increased their efficiency and productivity. The flip side of that, the converse, was that it was 16-17% of people who said that actually it had the converse effect. It hadn't improved their productivity or or efficiency. Last couple of stats then, just to help round this off. 4 out of 5 employees stated that flexible working had had a positive impact on their quality of life, and 1/3, 1 in 3, had stated that it actually had a positive impact on their career. And again, just to sort of balance that out, 3% of people felt that they had left a role in the last 12 months because of the inability to work flexibly. Now, when we factor that up to the UK workforce, that represents just over 1 million people, which is a fair amount of people leaving work because of the lack of opportunity to work flexibly. So I'll come back and talk a little bit about benefits in a moment, but rather than me ramble on about those, it will be great to see some real life benefits. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Zoe, who's going to talk about flexible working at Reboot.
Thanks. Yeah, so I didn't mention it earlier in my intro, but with Mahmood mentioning there, it's not all on HR. It's a organisational and operations issue as well. My background is actually operations. So I was operations director moving across to managing director at Reboot Online. And I've experienced different types of office life as well. So I've not always just been remote. I was fully in office, believe it or not, pre-COVID, hybrid and fully remote. I think being ops background, I'm all about efficiencies and productivity, and hybrid didn't really work for me. I'm an all or nothing kind of person. So the issues I had with hybrid, I think, is often you were sitting next to your teammates in office, which is all very nice, but you're also on a Teams call talking to people at home, all huddled around a laptop. And I find, obviously with remote, you're all remote, and it's about finding productive and efficient ways to work together. So at Reboot, we, as I mentioned, are also 4-day week, not just remote. That means no Fridays. And it's a clear cut no Fridays as well. So you'll find some people do condensed hours to make up for those lost hours. Or we did have the discussion of perhaps people working different days off, so to cover different client work and accounts. And we settled on clear cut Fridays off for many reasons, which I can get into. But not least, it makes it much easier to manage from an ops perspective when you know the whole team are offline on that day. So we also have flexible hours at Reboot. So we work 10 till 4 as our core hours, and we just ask that the team make very good use of Slack statuses. So if you were to pop down to the post office or walk your dog or get lunch, as long as your Slack is clear and you're available for your meetings and getting your work done, we've got those flexible hours that people can work around. So we have some very early starters, not me, I'm not a 7 a.m. riser, and we have people clocking on around 9:30 as well, but we find the majority of the office log on about 8 a.m. And people tend to get into a routine because I think we're all creatures of habit. And not only do we offer flexible working, we also offer nomad working as well. So to be clear with our remote policy, unlike I know Louise mentioned a few different areas there, we are UK only. That's just for certain tax reasons, but we do offer nomad working for up to 2 months currently. We might make that longer, across different green areas. So that means some of our staff can go home because we have a lot of European staff members like German and French as well. So it's very good around this time of year at Christmas for everybody to go. We moved to a permanent remote and 4-day week in 2021. So it was after COVID. We were in a barn just outside of London, a converted barn, not one with pigs and sheep. And we outgrew it during COVID. Business was booming. And rather than get a new office in London, we decided to go fully remote. And we've run our team profitably for years now. So we've had a 15% year-on-year growth. And we've got one of the best EBITDA margins I've ever seen in an agency. So I'm very proud of that, from an MD and ops background as well. We were also inspired by the Iceland 4-day week trials. So Reboot is very much known for our experiments, not only experiments in the industry for SEO, but also experiments for culture, different types of perks and policies. And we were monitoring Iceland, particularly our founder, Shai. It's a married couple that run the agency. I didn't mention that. But they had a few different work experiences in their time, with some difficult bosses. And it was a passion of theirs to make an environment where people were happy to work, coming in refreshed, and find a way to make that happen for the team. So we lent on that, looked at what was working there, and then ran from there. So what I guess started as more of a practical recruitment decision during COVID, because at the time, I don't know if you remember, but it was very much an employees market. We had a lot of people, this was at my prior agency actually, like jumping ship and getting offered higher salaries and different perks. For Reboot in particular, the 4-day week and remote work is what attracted A players. So initially what started as more of a recruitment decision became something much bigger than that. We are an agency, the talent is our product, and that setup has helped to protect and accelerate that. We attract A players. It really helps to set the bar and the expectations across the team and the performance. And outside of that, as I mentioned earlier, it's really helped us become this productive machine almost. The numbers don't lie. The increased revenue, the increased utilization rates. We really lent into Parkinson's law, which essentially is how much time you fit to. So if you have 5 days, you're going to fit your work to 5 days. If you've got 4, there's many things you can cut out, like inefficient meetings, to make you fit into that approach. And outside of that, we've worked to not only be modern in our approach, but modern in our tools. So again, the operations person in me loves a tool, and we rolled out ClickUp last year, which has an AI brain that answers everything. And the amount of time that's saved, well, that's a whole separate conversation. But yeah, that's how we got to where we are today. And I'll hand over to Louise to add her parts.
Thanks, Zoe. I mean, there are lots of similarities with what Zoe has shared, with what Interlink have been doing and trying to achieve. And I guess what was quite refreshing for me in 2002 was Andy, our CEO and co-founder, coming to me and saying, look, I want to be progressive with our people strategy. I want us to be future focused, and I want us to sort of center our culture and how people feel about working at Interlink as a place that cares about well-being and mental health. And at the time, very, very similar to what Zoe shared, we were inspired by 4-Day Week Global, which I think there were trials in Iceland initially. But at the time that we were considering it, the trials were happening in New Zealand, and Andy got in contact with 4-Day Week Global and started to get tips and have conversations. So looped me into those, and things started to, I guess, progress from there in terms of, yes, we want to do this and we want to be different. So I think at the time the goals were definitely around work-life balance, well-being, of course, attracting the best possible talent, and ultimately having some great outcomes around how engaged people are with the business, and also productivity as well, because you always want productivity to be in a really good place with any organization. So look, there were lots of things that we needed to consider. At the time, we were still a reasonably small organisation of less than 40 people. But we knew we wanted to introduce the 4-day week in a way that was right and sustainable for us, because up until that point, we had been working a very busy 5-day week, still working hybridly, but we wanted to make sure that we put things in place to enable the change to become permanent. So we went through, it was around about an 18-month transition in total. So for the first 6 months, everybody moved to 4.5 days a week. And similar to Zoe, we decided to pick Friday as the day that the whole business was going to have off. It made sense for us operationally. It was much easier in terms of you kind of planning workload for 4 consecutive days. And also in our sector, we work with a lot of businesses which are our agencies as well. And if we were going to pick a day, Friday would be probably the best day to be a non-working day. And around that, I guess I played a role to support the board with looking at, what do we need to have in place, culturally, process-wise, to sort of really facilitate the change. And I'll come on to that in a second. But in terms of the mechanics of getting there, so it was 6 months at 4.5 days a week. Then we moved to another 6 months where everybody had alternate Fridays off. And then we moved to another 6 months where the whole business had Fridays off. So we worked our way to that over a period of time. And other considerations that we need to have was around making sure that we've got the right collaboration tools in place, making sure that we actually do a really good job of communicating and educating this brilliant change with our clients and helping them to understand how it would not only benefit Interlink, but it would benefit them as well. And operationally, we put things in place, automated things in place, automated inboxes in on Friday, alerts, things like that, just to ensure that moving forward, we could sort of protect that Friday as our wellbeing day. And then outside that, to make all of this work, we needed to make sure that culturally we have got a foundation that is built around our values and trust, and creating that environment where people have got the right support and psychological safety. So alongside this transition, one of my roles was to make sure that we've got the right leadership development in place to support a new way of working, which we did. And we ran various different leadership programs across the layers of the company alongside the transition, which I think just helped to generate and create the mindset that we were looking for to really make this a success. So our model today, and we've been permanently a 4-day work week business now since 2023. It's pretty exciting because we were one of the early adopters in the UK to sort of move to this model. but pretty unheard of in Singapore and North America, where our employees there are getting to benefit from, the 4-day work week and the flexibility that we offer. So across those 3 global locations, we are all working Monday to Thursday. Everybody has Friday off. We decided that we wanted to have a little bit more structure around people coming into the office, because we do have small WeWork locations in New York, London, and Singapore. So we have some structure around different teams coming in once a week to learn, share, and collaborate, and celebrate the opportunity to do some in-person one-to-ones as well. It just worked for us to give that choice around being a mixture of remote and hybrid. So that's working quite well for us. And we have a very, very diverse team, not just demographically, but geographically as well. So we also introduced being able to work from any location around the globe to sort of support our diverse culture, and people can do that for up to 4 weeks a year. There are some legal and tax implications that we have to be mindful of and look into before we can approve that, but that's been another really great benefit that a number of people are using across the globe. And the flexibility we have around our working week, so we all work 32 hours a week, Monday to Thursday. And I think where we've got to with our culture and our leadership style is we want people to feel they have flexibility around those hours, because we've got different employees with different work and life schedules. Of course, the core for us is making sure that we continue to give an amazing experience to our clients and that they're very happy. So we always have that at the forefront of our mind. But on an individual basis, there's flexibility around your daily working hours. And that typically is, discussed at colleague and manager level. But similar to Zoe, it's a bit more informal, but core hours are probably 10 to 4. But we're not necessarily enforcing core hours, because we just want there to be the right amount of flexibility for individuals and teams. And just to sort of give an additional focus around ensuring sort of the mental health and wellbeing piece, we have other days that are carved out throughout the year to allow people the right time and headspace to support that. And also what's really nice for us over the sort of the December break is the whole business shuts down, and we're given additional days there as well, just to make sure that people get to properly decompress and refresh, ready to start the new financial year in January. So it's been brilliant to be part of the transition and sort of leading things from a people perspective, but also really great just to be working with 2 founders that are so passionate about creating a really forward-thinking people strategy.
Thank you both, Louise and Zoe. Some 2 very interesting stories there. And I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming up in the Q&A piece, and I think we may be able to pick up a couple of these now. In terms of, I'm going to keep you on the spot, as it were, talking about Reboot and Interlink. I think what would be really helpful, I mean, there were very compelling stories that you shared there. And it's great to see how well embedded your operating environment, your operational framework is. But I think it'd be really good to share just some of the challenges that you faced when you got that. And for me, I was thinking about these when I was sort of listening there, which is there's almost two categories of challenges, aren't there? There's the sort of how do we actually do this, the operational side, but the one that I sort of spent a little bit more time reflecting on was the sort of mindset one, the behavioural one, which is, the discipline, which, you just see something pop up on your phone on a Friday at 1:00 in the afternoon, and, have you helped to sort of create that environment where it is as clean as you talk that it is, as you described it, and you don't suddenly, one person doesn't suddenly send an email on a Friday or make a call, and then somebody else does, and then somebody else does, and it sort of starts gradually with the best intentions unwinding itself. So I'll leave it to the two of you. Perhaps, Zoe, if you want to start just chatting through some of the operational sort of challenges and how you address those.
I guess Louise and I both shared a very similar origination story there with our founders. Sort of they were the ones that were passionate behind this and leading by example from the top. So obviously I can only speak for myself, but yeah, our founders love Cornwall. They wanted to be down there saving the seal pups. We actually saved one that we named Marshmallow last week, so that was very cute. I think being away from your desk and leading by that example is a key fact. You have to have everyone's buying if you're going to do this and roll it out. It can't just be one of you on the side, so say a people leader or me as ops wanting this to happen and the rest of the team don't back you. So I think those early discussions are very important, and make sure you have genuine agreement from the leadership team initially. We have put guardrails in place, again, as Louise was saying, to protect mental health on a Friday. We've made it very clear what our Fridays are for. They're to recharge, to take some of your own time. I personally have found that very beneficial. I'm quite introverted, so having my Friday off to recharge, I've actually made more friends on a Saturday because I've got that, with the view that you can come in on a Monday refreshed. That's our goal. But we've also not actually we've gone the other way. We've not set really strict rules in that we say everyone's an adult here. We hire grown-ups. Sure, you might have Slack on your phone, but it's down to you to put your notifications on and when you turn those off on a Friday. And we show people how to do that when they join, where they can find that access. But also, we've got a lot of parents in the team. It attracts this sort of setup does actually attract quite a lot of parents and mums especially. And we find that they might want to log on a Thursday evening and finish some work and send that across. And if they're pinging that across, someone else on the team that works 7 till say 4 can turn their notifications off as well. And yeah, we've not found that to be an issue. I don't know, Louise, if you've got any additional insight.
Yeah. What I would say that helps is the role modelling and the founders leading by example. So that massively helps, because that sense of feeling that it's okay not to log on a Friday, definitely comes from them role modelling and having their out of office on and not contacting people on a Friday. However, even though we did our sustainable transition, it is a habit, right? Working on a Friday, because you've been so used to that in many instances. Well, definitely all the years I've been working, when I've been working full time, that's what you do on a Friday, because a lot of the rest of the world are still working. So it's that sort of personal adjustment, which people have to sort of go through and be disciplined with, not sort of scratching that itch to check your emails, see what's coming in, check your teams. And I think it's something that we're still working on and still encouraging, people not to do. But it is hard when you're also trying to scale a business, because we are at a stage now where we want to start ramping up to go through our sort of next level of scale. And how do we make sure that we try and protect the Fridays and protect the well-being and the work-life balance that we've got for people. So I wouldn't say it's a nice challenge to have, because we are all very passionate about Interlink succeeding as a business and have a great culture of support and collaboration. And there are little bits and bobs that I know for people drip into a Friday. And I think psychological safety for some people does mean I just want to feel comfortable going into the weekend and spend half an hour just making sure that I've ticked off everything that I want to Monday to Thursday. I'm going to really enjoy the rest of my Friday and the rest of my weekend. So I think that we've got to balance a tiny bit of flexibility to individuals and actually what really works for them as well. But yes, I think just sort of going back to the sort of the discipline side, I think leaders role modeling it, the founders role modeling it absolutely helps in terms of, setting out the stall right and getting the right mindset.
And you can showcase that as well as a leader. So from my side, I now do reformer Pilates on a Friday. Can't wait for my abs to show. And I get my nails done every month. And I ping that in Slack. I ping like, I'm off to reformer. What's everyone else doing? Or like, these are the nails I've got for this season. So that encourages that chat as well.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I mean, I loved your comment actually, Zoe, and it's one that I think isn't paid enough attention to, which is treat adults as adults. If we think about our lives outside of work, we make tremendously important decisions about how we live our lives, whether that's to do with families, friends, our finances, and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that used to frustrate me a lot was how in some organisations there was just so many rules and regulations and policies that it almost took away your ability to act as an adult. So the fact that that's a core underpin there, treat adults as adults, we're all grown ups. I think that's something that we sometimes lose sight of a lot. But I'd like to sort of switch a little bit and talk. We've talked about the challenges there and talk a little bit about, I suppose, two things. I want to chat about benefits in a moment, but it's great we have this environment where we're working, sort of 4 days a week, and we're doing everything that we can, pretty successfully, as it were, to, keep that embedded. How do you manage the customers?
That's a good. I was literally talking to my sister about this morning. So with remote work, I'm actually in Brighton at the moment, enjoying seeing my family, and we lean into it heavily. So we're an agency, we pitch, we have a slide on our workflows about us, and we highlight the fact that we genuinely attract A-class talent. They will be working with the best of the best. I highlight our productivity increases, our utilization rates, and just reassure as well on our workflow. So what they can expect on the onboarding stage. Again, ops person in me has done every single milestone that they can expect to see. And they know upfront what they're going into. That we also lean on retention of our staff. So another agency issue that's quite well known is account managers switching over often. You don't get that with us. We've got, if anything, it's the other way around, like us trying to work with who we've got on the team. So yeah, they know they're working with the best. They know they're working with certain language speakers on their accounts. If they're going global, they know they'll get to keep said account manager. And they know that they're working with an agency that's forward thinking. Again, we say it's not just experiments for the industry, it's experiments for the culture as well. And they get to benefit from that. And again, we've just won the best global SEO agency. So I can't say much more on our approach. So that's how we tackle it.
And Louise, what about you with your customer base?
Yeah, I mean, lots of similarities there. I think in terms of our brand and our employer brand, it's all about being disruptors in our industry from a people and an innovation perspective. And they both go hand in hand because we attract the best people. We're constantly innovating. We're able to innovate because people have the time and space to think and the well-being to do, the best job that they can. So yeah, I think we have a lovely sort of story and narrative with our clients around why we're the best and how we're the best and how the 4-day work week supports that. And through that, the education that we did with the transition of moving to the 4 days, we had lots of great discussions with our clients and the support was overwhelming. There weren't any concerns around Friday. Obviously, we did map out how things would work and, the fact that we would ensure the client experience would remain the same. And it has. And, we've got the data to sort of back all of that up as well, which is, nice to be able to sort of share with the business and with our clients, particularly from a retention perspective.
That workflow point, actually, just jumping on one good exercise to do if you're taking this seriously and thinking about doing it on a Friday with your clients is to jot down actually how much comes through that's urgent and how many messages actually come through on a Friday via email from clients versus the rest of the week. You might be surprised because many companies use Fridays to wind down a little bit actually, and most are sort of logged off by 2. So it's quite a good exercise to do when you then want to address those conversations.
And how we actually assessed that, Zoe, was setting up the Friday urgent inbox, and it was tumbleweed. You know, hardly any requests were coming through from clients on a Friday. So again, I think that was sort of reassuring just around the narrative that we've been sharing with our clients and the education. And to your point, Fridays, particularly within our industry, doesn't necessarily mean lots of new briefs coming in.
We touched on, and you in particular then, Zoe, touched on, the benefits, but you were very much positioning the benefits from a client management almost point of view, which is about hiring, the top of the top of it, as it were, A players and so forth. And when I was thinking about the benefits and thinking about Nexus, which is, we're building up our capacity to bring in graduates and apprentices into the planning arena, because planning's offers a really good career pathway for people, to progress and develop. And it's amazing to see actually how attuned, I suppose is the best word, people coming in at that level, the sort of 16, 18 through to 23, 24-year-olds, how important the way that we work as an organisation is as much as how much money am I going to get paid, as it were. I remember when I was a graduate trainee, that was the first question I asked. I couldn't give, whether I work 5 days a week in the office, it was just taken as read. But the way that people work is so important now to people in terms of their consideration for roles. And I was thinking about what the other benefits you've seen have been. I've touched on there about broadening the recruitment pool, broadening the talent pool, hiring, looking at hiring the top talent, as it were. And I'd like to start with you, if that's okay, Louise, because you just talked then about the metrics that you've got from your customers in terms of actually almost validating everything that you're doing. So the measurement side of things and the benefit side of things are sort of coinciding there. The meeting together, aren't they?
Yeah, I think there are probably sort of 3 areas for me in terms of being able to assess the benefits. What we've already talked about, recruitment, retaining staff, but I also think thinking about sort of culture and well-being. So we've seen an increase in our engagement survey results. We've seen an improvement in our sickness absence, quite a significant improvement in our sickness absence rates. Not that they were concerning to start off with, but just being able to over a period of years see them come down by about 12% was really encouraging for us. And year on year, every engagement survey that we're doing and where we're specifically talking about flexibility, hybrid working, and sort of the cultural initiatives that are alongside that, we have seen the scores around those areas be in sort of the mid to high 90s in terms of how engaged people are. And each year the score has gone up incrementally as well. And then, and I do believe there is a direct link to sort of the business performance side. So, where we're getting an improvement on our retention rate with clients, where we're hitting our revenue targets. I mean, year on year for the last 3 years since I've been working at Interlink, and even before, we've hit and often exceeded our revenue targets. And we've definitely seen that since we've introduced the 4-day week. So very encouraging also, from the founder's perspective as well, that the numbers and the business performance keep going from strength to strength. There's been no impact by going down to a 4-day work week.
And that to me comes across as a very simple example. And when we're measuring things like this, it is often best to keep things as simple as possible, isn't it? Don't try and add too much, which is you're looking at 4-day week, you're looking at clear trends in terms of engagement. And we know that when people are, when work doesn't feel like work, when they're enjoying them, I'll use the phrase enjoying themselves at the work, then, we're at our best, as it were. So there's a very simple, almost linear link there between 4-day working week engagement, what that means in terms of how the business is performing. And of course, there are going to be other factors that shape that, but it's easy for you to draw that line. Is that something that you've seen as well, Zoe, in terms of that clear linkage?
It's exactly the same. It's a very, very clear link in the graph. We get everything up. So I guess for me as MD, the key things, obviously revenue coming through, as I mentioned earlier, 15% year-on-year growth, and EBITDA, very high EBITDA percentage that shot up after introducing this. The economy has been tough. Agencies are, like many of them are, struggling. And for us to continue to grow, I very much put that down to a lot of those elements Louise was highlighting there. It all feeds in, right? So we also run pulse surveys, engagement, job satisfaction is through the roof, like 90% plus. We run them every March, and then we do pulse surveys following that. Sickness is down, staff retention is high, client retention remains high, where we're not switching account managers, as I mentioned, and they're buying into our experiments, as we said, not only culture, but the sort of work we're putting out too. So yeah, it all feeds in. I'd say another element for us is brand awareness. So not just clients and general culture, but running things like this gets me on webinars like this. I've talking on stage at the British Library and many others around our career development and culture as well. So it's also improved our brand awareness.
And I think, again, for me, it's when we're looking at what are the things that you can measure to assess the benefit of and the success of what we're doing. We're not really talking about having to introduce or think of or introduce new metrics, because the metrics are all there. It's just about making sure you've got the information to be able to make those links, which, from listening to both of you there, that's, absolutely clear from that. Before we get on to just looking at some of the questions that have come through, there is one last area I just want to cover, which is one I'm a bit scared of, which is about technology, because I'm a bit of a fuddy-duddy, as it were, with tech. But how has using tech, I mean, you've talked about Slack on a few occasions, Zoe, how important has having that sort of tech framework been to allowing the success of your flexible working arrangements?
Very important for us, especially because it's not just the flexible hours, it's the fully remote element as well. Slack for us, Slack, I would say, is the best tool in terms of water cooler moments. So when I joined in ops, we only had Slack, and honestly, it was a bit of a nightmare because all the requests were coming in everywhere all the time, and you couldn't really switch off. So the stack you decide to use, I think, is key. So for us, it's Slack for just those general comms, community building, strategic conversations, anything you'd do around like the coffee machine in the office. And then we use ClickUp as our project management tool. I'm sure there's many others. There's like Monday, Trello, but I think picking a project management tool is vital. And for us, we chose ClickUp because it automates a lot. So it forces processes almost with templates. And we're on the enterprise version, which has an AI brain. So again, I keep banging on about my ops background, but I'm obsessed with processes. I did get my head down and write a how-to for absolutely everything, how to do everything the reboot way. Pull it into ClickUp, and you just ask the brain, and it tells you when's our Christmas shutdown, how many holidays do we get, how do I use Slack, how do I use BuzzStream, how do I pitch to a client. All of it can answer. So I think you do have to put the time in to your tech stack and be very clear on what you use, all the way down to what AI note taker you use. But once you've got that sorted, I think there's no looking back.
A real Slack advocate there and tech advocate. Louise, anything to add from your perspective in terms of how tech has helped you embed the flexible working and the remote working?
Yeah, I think just to sort of build on that, I guess we have a remote first mindset, because we do have teams that are fully remote and some that work hybrid. So making sure that we have the relevant connections for people, either via Teams meetings, or using, for example, Trello, which is a project management tool. But also, I think because Interlink is an AI first business, we're continually trying to look at how we're doing tasks, how effective that they are from a time perspective, and what tools can we introduce to help automate things or streamline things. And that's just going to be ever evolving for our business, because not only do we have a product that is AI powered and our own sort of machine learning team, we also want to be AI first with how we're operationalizing the business. But like I said, that's a bit of an ongoing journey and not necessarily my area. It sort of sits with tech, but I'm interested in it. It's going to be really interesting to see what more we can do to support flexibility, to support the 4-day and protect the 4-day work week with AI and tools and tech.
Okay, great. So I'm conscious we've been chatting away for almost an hour now. So let's move on to the closing part of today's webinar and have a chat around some of the questions that have come in. There's a couple. I'm going to start with a killer question. We talked about it earlier, and it'll be interesting to see what each of our individual perspectives are on this. It's a question that comes in that says, my boss will say there isn't enough time for a 4-day working week. Any suggestions? So I loved your reference to Parkinson's law before, Zoe, and it's something that I absolutely agree with, which is we fill the time, whatever the time is there, as it were. But I'll share some thoughts in a moment. But how would you deal with that?
Well, we've actually been dealing with that quite a lot in the last year. I'd say we didn't touch on it too much, but one of the challenges we have actually had is new talent coming through, having never worked a 5-day week. So they're like lucky enough to join an agency that's remote 4-day. It's all they've ever known. And we actually, I could talk about it for days, but we actually hired an external hire to come in and talk about focus management, not time management, and very much where you focus your time. I think we're having an epidemic at the moment where people were easily distracted, constantly strolling on TikTok, Instagram, wanting really quick answers, skipping around your work perhaps, and not just getting into deep work, and also a struggle with prioritizing. So we've recently shifted to outcomes over outputs every 2 weeks. I set clear outcomes for the agency, what they need to achieve in those 2 weeks across the board, and everyone works towards those, and that helps them time block and then prioritize their time to focus on closing the things that matter to us. And we really celebrate that and shout out. And as I said earlier, in Parkinson's law, like, don't get me wrong, I don't think I could fit 5 days into one. I would if I could, but 4 days is very, very reasonable. And so, I would point to the data, point to our success, point to Parkinson's law, and then look at how you're prioritizing time as an agency. How do you do that as a whole? And do you need to look at some deep work days?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I was going to pick this up, and Louise touched on this a little bit, is what we're talking about here is change is difficult for people to deal with because we love things being the same. So, and Louise talked about this, but I was going to talk about, the need to, how do you actually shift from one model to another? That you need a little bit of time. You need to do some test and learns. And Louise, you talked a little bit about trialing those different models, the 4.5 day week for a period of time. Just remind everybody, were they sort of 6-month windows that you used for those different models? Yeah. And how did you assess what sort of how they were working? Was that a continual process, or did you wait till the end and say, well, what does everybody think? We've just done 6 months at X, Y, Z.
Yeah, it was ongoing. So we agreed a trial period, and we agreed the windows and how we were going to plan it out. And we continuously took feedback from managers. And And I guess before we even started, we got our manager population into a room and said, look, this is what we're planning to do. Let's sort of workshop out what we think the challenges are, what we need to overcome, and then go on this trial period, go on this sort of transition. And yeah, we sort of took learnings as we went along. What I would say, just in answer to sort of the question that came up in terms of how do you sort of talk about the benefits of moving to a 4-day week for somebody that might be sort of reluctant to doing that because of how could we could get everything done. I think to Zoe's point, go back to the data, go back to the language around the business benefits, retaining clients, better results with revenue, better results with margin. I mean, I think if you can build a narrative around that and collect data, you can then overlay that with, well, let's test it. Let's trial it. Not only could this be really good financially for the business, but it would also enable us to attract the best talent and enable us to create a culture where people are really happy and engaged. And that engaged part means it's quite straightforward to move to a 4-day work week, because you've got the right mindset, you've got the right collaboration.
Thank you. So it looks like the final question that we've got is about, what does onboarding look like?
Good question.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I'll just share a little bit about with us at Nexus. I mean, we just try and keep one. We're very focused about what it is that we know what it is that people need to know to help them be successful sooner or later. So having clarity about what is the information that you want to share with somebody is really, really important. And we always test that, actually. So whenever somebody new is onboarded into the organisation, we always do a sense check with them, sort of after 4 weeks, after 6 weeks, after 8 weeks. What is it that you're still struggling with? What is it that's worked really well? So we're always continually testing that. But we're fortunate enough that we're able to do a bit of a blend of some, an element of virtual onboarding, but we keep the virtual onboarding to, let's say, the more fact, this is how you do stuff type of environment, type of content, and the getting into understand the organisation, understand the way that we work and the planning process applies and how we advise clients. We do that much more. We're able to do that on a sort of one-to-one type basis. So we blend across those two. How does it work for you two?
Similar, actually, in terms of we know what good looks like, we know what the expectations are, KPIs. We have multiple touch points before someone joins the agency. They join, big announcement on Slack, 10 a.m. meeting with me. We've got a big ClickUp template that goes through everything, a little document about us as an agency, core USPs. And then I didn't mention it earlier, but I think Louise mentioned WeWork and things like that. We do have Hubble, which is like the Deliveroo of co-work. You can pick different co-working spaces and use your credits. And we say within the first month just to meet up with your manager or team member and go out for a lunch. Just a bit of a chat as well. So we do have that element as well. And we've had raving reviews about our onboarding. Quite proud of that. So yeah, happy with our setup.
Louise.
Yeah. I mean, very similar. We get excellent feedback from new joiners, and our onboarding is pretty much virtual. And yeah, I guess a combination of having a really nice experience of actually meeting all of the senior leaders, and it might only be for half an hour in their first week, but that has a huge impact on I guess getting access to somebody that's maybe a bit more senior than you and hearing their story and their vision and what they're doing within their own department. But Jay and Andy, the co-founders, also meet everybody virtually in their first couple of weeks as well, which is a really nice touch. So we have a lot of structure around meeting all the key people. While we're still at a size where we can do it, we also schedule a 10-15 minute little coffee with everybody in the business. So by the end of your first couple of weeks, you'd have met every single employee that works for Interlink. And we have a platform called 5Mins that we use. It's an LMS platform, but we have an onboarding pathway in there, which is a combination of videos that we've created, little documents, just to help people really get under the skin of the business and what they need to know in their roles and what's important. And then outside of that, the people teams spend time with each of the heads of department, creating similar pathways that are very relevant to you, learning what you need to know for joining that department. And the journey actually starts well before that, because we have certain points that we connect with people before they even join and share information. So they're coming into their first day with a really good idea of what their first few weeks are going to look like, and get that buzz and excitement around working for Interlink.
Yeah, that's a great point. That induction doesn't start on the first day of employment. Induction will start several days, several weeks before somebody starts, actually. So from that moment where you've made the offer and they've accepted it, how you talk with the person, how you engage with them, the information that you share, we should treat all that as part of the induction process. Not, I'm here at whatever o'clock in the morning, or logged onto the first call at whatever o'clock in the morning. Induction's been happening from the moment they've said yes to the role. So that's an important point to remember. Well, I think that's pretty much it for today. An hour and a bit. It's not felt like an hour and a bit. Lots and lots of information that's been shared. So, thank you to both of you, Zoe and Louise, for some great insight, absolutely great insight in terms of what we've shared today. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us that if there's some questions that come into the team at Don't Panic, we will be more than happy to pick those up and answer those for any questions that come in. But other than that, thank you everybody who's joined the webinar today. And we hope we've shared some useful and some helpful insights to you all. So thank you very much. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.